Hi. So, as a PaintShop Pro user, you might have seen the picture tube icon in here, and you might be wondering what they are. A lot of people think that they are just little stickers that you can place all over. Of course, they can be just stickers like that, but they can be much more. And if you go online and you go on Google and you search for PaintShop Pro tubes, unfortunately, you will get an array of other things that are not the same thing as the picture tubes for PaintShop. For some odd reason, I'm not sure exactly when it started, but it seemed to have started way before PaintShop was part of the Corel products, so it might have been from the Jazz time. And at one point, I found that the word tubes was used for just about any object that was extracted and had no background. So if you had a flower and you would remove the background, you would save it as a PNG, and that people would call them tubes. Like there were flower tubes, there were animal tubes, there were object tubes, but they're not tubes because the tubes in PaintShop Pro have a specific extension, which is PSP tube, while those extracted elements are usually PNG files. So they're just basically like any other image that has been extracted. So the people who have been creating those extracted elements have been labeled, if you can call it like that, tubers. So some people are specialists in extracting flowers and objects from background, so then you can have those objects to place on your projects. And you can have a tree here and a flower there and a bench, and you can have all those elements in PNG format, and you can layer them to create your composition. But the picture tubes in PaintShop are more than that. So let's just have a look at some of the picture tubes. Here are some picture tubes that come with PaintShop. I'm not exactly sure if these are from the 2018 version or previous version, because I do have quite a few. And you have, for example, like a rivet, this one. And as I click, I can click and get those to appear. Okay, I'm just going to delete that. I can have, and in this case, you can notice they're all the same, or pretty much. I think some are more silvery, some are more golden. You can have them in different colors. So every time you click, you get a new tube or a new impression. And these are the kinds that kind of look like stickers or behave like stickers. Like if I have, for example, little tags, I can have different tags every time I click. So those are usually used as a single element, or if you want to have a bunch of them, you can click and drag with your cursor and have a whole bunch. So that could be what you want. But picture tubes in PaintShop have also different types. So overall, we have two types, and subtypes we have more. We have the single tubes or single image tubes. So I will go here and find, I have the little flowers. Well, they're not that little. And it's only one image all the time. So if I want to have a whole bunch, I can just drag my cursor and I have a whole background made of a single tube. In the tool settings here, I have different options. I can change the scale. So this one was 50 and was pretty big. So I can reduce the scale and have smaller flowers. The steps is here 500, which is like 500% of what I have. Okay. If I wanted them closer, I could change that. And you can see how they would be closer. Maybe I want to make a necklace that looks like all threaded flowers. I could do that. We have also multiple image that can be used. So for example, I have here, this is garden, and every time I click, I'll have something different, just like I had with the little tabs earlier. The number of different images will really depend on how the tube or the set of tube was created. You can have from one image like we had with the flower, and you can have over 100 if you want so. If you want to see how many elements are in that, you have the little gear here where you can pop up, and this one, it says that the actual file includes 5 rows of 3 or 5 by 3. Anyways, there's 15 images that are different, and the placement mode is random. So the spacing will not be even, like every 300 pixels or something like that. And the selection mode is also random. So it could be the image number 1, the image number 8, and then 6 and 3 and 12 randomly. It could be different for other kinds of tubes, and we'll see that. So if we have incremental, then it would be image 1 and then 2 and then 3, 4, 5, always in the same order. Pressure and velocity, that works mostly when you have a tablet, although I'm not sure how effective. I haven't found yet too many options or too many tubes that use these features. And then you have the random, which is this one, and angular is when the actual tube selected, the actual image selected will depend on the movement of your cursor. And again, we will look at some of those a little further. Here is one example of a random selection of a tube that consists of several images. Let's have a look at another tube that uses an incremental selection. Okay, let's find that. Okay, this is a rope. Okay, this is a rope tube that comes with your paint shop. This tube will allow you to literally draw a rope in any length or shape. Like this. See how easy it is. You just drag. Wherever you go with your cursor, you draw a rope. Now let's look at the details of this tube. You can see that it has a total of 12 images and the placement is incremental. So what happens? What do they look like? Okay, no, that's a little too wide. Let's change that a little bit. Okay, this is good. So here, let's zoom in so you can see a bit better. Notice how each of the images are different and they are slightly rotated from one to the other. So if we go back, see how placing them one at a time will give that twisted look all through the area where you will drag your cursor. So this is the kind of tube that has incremental selection mode. So each image in the set is selected one after the other, always in the same order to give that even effect. Another one that is available is here for example, the metal balls, and you have small, 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 and then a big. It's always the same thing. So if I go and drag in different directions, it doesn't matter which direction I go. It's always one big and then X number of small ones and the big one. This is the exact order. They are selected incrementally, and the placement mode is continuous. It's not random. It's exactly the same number of pixels in between to give the effect. If I wanted to change this to random, for example, you can see how the result is not as even. It could be something you want, so there's no right or wrong way. It just depends on how you want to use the actual tube. So I'll just put it back to continuous. Now these we saw the random, the incremental, and there's also the angular. Some picture tubes are meant to go based on the angle of the cursor. So let's remove this one. And this is a tire track. And if you look at the movement, see how it follows. Okay, it might not be the perfect track as if you had your car or your bike drive, but it gives really a good idea of how the angular placement works with a tube that works for that. Because of course, if I'm using a picture tube that is meant to be selected on a regular, or no, sorry, randomly, and I use it and I change the mode to angular, I might not get the same result. The same thing as here, I'm supposed to use it angular mode, and if I change it to random, well, it doesn't make much sense anymore. So they are really, the settings are set to give the best result based on the actual picture tube. We have another example of a picture tube that is directional, so that has, where is it? Here. Look at this one. And okay, it's pretty small. Maybe I'll just increase the scale so you can see better. Oops. You can see the chain. It looks continuous. In reality, it's only one little link, and if I go horizontally, I'll get this link. If I go at a different angle, I'll get a different link. But when I do continuous movement of my cursor, I get some kind of a smoother line. Of course, again, it's not perfect all the time. It depends on the size and how much of a curve I'm using. So just for information, the tire track and the chain will be part of the picture tubes that you will be able to get for free. So how do you install picture tubes? Well, they are extremely simple, because if you are actually downloading a real picture tube, so the extension should be PSP tube, you simply copy, save them in your picture tubes folder, and that's it. Nothing, no export to do, no import, no export, nothing about that. You just save them in the correct folder, and that's it. They will appear as long as they're unzipped. No problem there. So that's the easy way to get picture tubes. But again, you have to be careful, because if you are getting tubes that are called tubes, but they are PNG format or PSP image format, those, if you put them in a picture tubes folder, they won't appear, because they have to be PSP tube extension. And you don't just change the extension either. It's not because you have flower 1 dot PNG. You cannot just change the PNG and say, oh, it's going to be, I'm going to change that to PSP tube and it's going to be a tube. No, it has to go through, at that point, it has to go through the import or export feature to become a tube. We'll look at that a little later. So what can you do with picture tubes? Well, it depends on the kind of picture tubes that you are going to be using. Of course, if you have a tire track picture tube, you won't put them in the same kind of composition as if you have flowers, or you have a garland, or you have buttons. They are all different, so they are going to be used differently. I'm going to just show an example. I found online a little, well, not that little, a tree shape. So this tree looks pretty bare. What I want to do, I'm going to add some grass. So in the picture tubes, pretty much those that come from PaintShop, there's one here, grass one, and grass patch. This one has longer grass. So I'm going to do a neatly trimmed grass, and I'm going to place that on a different layer just because that will allow me to change and layer my elements. And I put that under my tree, and I'll just have something like that. Isn't that neat? So much easier than mowing the lawn. So now I have a nice lawn for my tree. Now what can I do? I can also add some leaves on that tree. So again, I'm going to add a new raster layer, and I'm going to place that on top of the tree because I want the leaves to appear on top. And for this one, I go under plants and leaves. I have some summer leaves, some autumn leaves, some other leaves. It might not be very realistic because all the leaves are going to be different. So typically you'd have the same leaves like maple leaves or oak leaves and so on. So I'm just going to brush with my cursor, and I have now a bushy tree. I could have a few on the ground if I want. Now I can add some bushes. So I'll just go back to my nature, and I have some here, vegetation. Again, new raster layer. Don't forget, because you might have a hard time moving them. And I'm going to have some kind of an edge here. One thing that comes in recent versions of PaintShop, there is a setting here where you have create as a new raster layer. I said that you have to add a new layer. That you can get around without it if you have this box checked. If you look, every click will create a new raster layer. See, created one. I make another one. Make another one. So every time I click, if I do a continuous placement, this will all be in that single layer. Okay, so that allows you to then move around your elements. But the downside of that is that you might end up with a really large number of layers. So imagine that my leaves here, that I was, instead of dragging my cursor, I was clicking all over, I would probably have already about 50 layers, which could be long to work with. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to merge a few of these. Because I don't want to keep that many. So now I want to add some flowers. Again, I'll add a new raster layer. And I'll go back with my tubes. And let's go with those white flowers. Let's see how big. I'm going to uncheck that because I don't want to have a ton of layers. Okay, this is obviously too big for my bushes. So I'm going to reduce that. And I have little flowers. If I find they are still too big, I can always reduce that to maybe 15. So I don't drag, because if I was to drag, they would be like too close together to my liking. So that's why I click and click. And also that is why I don't want to create a new raster layer for each click, because I'm just going to have way too many. And if I want to add maybe pink flowers, I'll add a new raster layer. And let's check the size. Again, it's too big. I'm going to go down to 10, this one. Because they're red, because they're colored, they'll pop up more. So now you have something interesting. Okay, let's add something now around the tree. Maybe at the base of the tree, I can go back to my, which one was it? I think it was the other one, under plants and leaves. Nope. Here, garden. I thought it was they're pretty big, so I'm just going to go down maybe to 30. And this time I want to have them on separate layers because I don't want to have too many. I'm just going to have a few. Well, I think I went down a little too much. Let's go back to... Okay, so as you can see, I put one on top. It's not really the best placement. So now that they are individual layers, I can move them around. And I could think also, well, maybe this one I find too big. I want to remove it. No problem. Because they are on separate layers, you can do that. But again, it means also that you have quite a few layers. Let's add a new layer. And I'm going to add some clouds. So those are pretty small. So I'm going to make them any larger and not going to create a new layer for each. So I'm going to enlarge these. And I get a few clouds behind my tree. And I'll just slide that layer behind the tree, of course. There. And I'll just add a blue background. Just a nice blue background. And I have a nice scenery. So all that you can see has been using traditional tubes that are basically like little stickers, but they are used in a way that you can make a nice composition. But there's much more that you can do. You can create frames with picture tubes. Of course, you can make a frame out of flowers and leaves, but you can do many other things. Like, for example, I'll create an ellipse and that's to create just the shape. I'm only going to use this as a shape. I'm going to remove it so the color has absolutely no importance. And to place my tubes, I can do that manually. So I can add a new raster layer. I can choose, for example, let's say that I want to choose those flowers. And I think they were pretty big. Yeah, way too big. Let's go to 10. Okay, so I could go and place my flowers around, but well, it's not very clean as far as placement. If it was a square or rectangular placement, what I could do is I could click on one corner, hold the shift key, click on the other corner, keep holding the shift key, and I could have a nice square frame. But that won't work with a circular frame or a different shape. Like if you have a star or if you have a heart, it's really much harder to do it manually. So what we can do is use an actual script. It's a free script. It used to be on the Pixel Nook site, but now that the site is no longer available, it's still available on my store. No account needed. It's the download is there, so you could go and grab this script. For this script, you have to make sure that you have your shape, right click and convert to path. You have to make sure that, because otherwise it won't work. And now let's just reselect the same picture tube. So it has the same settings I had before. And if I run it, you can see how my flowers are all placed perfectly around the edge. I'll just hide this layer and reactivate my vector shape. And if I want the placement mode this time to be continuous, because previously it was random, so they were unevenly distributed, now I want to place them evenly. And you can see how this frame now looks really interesting. It's very easy to do. And you can do that with just about any tube that you have. So let's reactivate this and let's change that to possibly, I'll go back to those leaves. Okay, I'm just going to use the raster layer here to just test the size. Okay, that's not bad. So I'm reactivating my vector shape and I'll run it. And you can see how I have this. And if I want to have more, the options are either I change the steps to have like more closer together, or I can just run it a second time and I'll get more. And I can reactivate and run again. So if you have a nice picture of, you know, a walk in the woods or something like that, you can frame it with this. And when you are done, you simply hide that shape and you have your frame. It's very simple, but it's really giving a new touch on your frame. You can use so many. Let's just remove some of those. So you could use those flowers. You could use, for example, a garland. And I think it's this one that you will get, and run the script. And you get a really thick garland. Or maybe I'll just reduce the scale and run it again. So you can see how it can be really interesting. You place your photo inside. Or we could have, let's see, the wool, blue, and this is giving a softer look than those garlands. Why not? But we can do so much. We can try again. Oops, not changing that. Okay, gave it the wrong command. And I could go again with my gold chain. And let's go back to that tube. I accidentally changed the script. Vector tube. And now I have a really fine chain around. If I wanted to have it bigger, I could simply change the scale and run it again. And you can see how nice it looks. It's really, you can then create frames and shapes with whatever tube you have, especially the angular ones, those that are directionals, will give a fantastic result. Now let's create just another fun one. I'm just going to close this. And again, just open a new image. And as far as a shape, I'm going to use okay. I'm going to use a star, just a regular, ordinary star here. So I'm going to make this. Again, the shade, the color has absolutely no impact. And I'm going to right click to make sure that it is a path. Oops. It doesn't want to. I'll use my pen tool. Right click, convert to path is grayed out, so it's already a path. And I'm going to use this time a rope. Natural rope, where is it? Oops. And I think it's the number 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to use this rope and I'm going to run it. And I have a nice rope around. So it kind of gives a nautical look. And if I want to add to that, I can now use my pen tool, use the freehand, and I can just draw around a new path where that looks really odd. Don't worry. For this one, I'll add a different rope so it will twirl or twist around. So let's just select the other rope. I think I have it here, purple. So how small it is. Okay, that's good. So I will go back to my shape, make sure that the shape here is selected, and I'll run the script again. And here I have it. See, my rope is all around. And in order to make sure that it goes over and under, I'll just use my magic wand, select for replace. The match mode is opacity, and I will select that star here. So everything that is on top of the actual rope, I'll go back to my twisted rope, and using my eraser tool, I'll just alternate. So what is on here it's going to go under. So I'll remove, then on top, then under, I'll remove, on top, under, on top, under, on top, under, on top. See, over and under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over and under. Okay. And I deselect with my Control D, and you can see how this gives a unique effect. So you can create a frame, you have twisted frames, as long as you are using a path, a vector shape, and then you can run that script and have your tube placed all around. Okay, so that's kind of a fun project. Now, I said that I would show also how to create your own tubes. Well, it depends on what kind of tubes you want to use. First of all, a single image tube is good to create as a tube if you are going to use them often. So for example, if you have flares and you want to have a lot of them, or you want to have a flower that you want to repeat all over. But you can also have, for example, your signature. If you're a photographer, you might want to have your signature always, and you don't want to redo it again. You could use just a regular PNG image and just copy and paste. But you can just make it as a tube, so it's one click. So let's create a signature tube. So I'm just going to open an image that I want to use here. Let's say that I want to create a signature with my title of PaintShop Professional. So I'll copy this and paste it here. Then I'll add in black. So I don't want any blue. I'll put my name. Okay, I'll increase the size of that and accept it, and I'll just move it. And I want to make it bigger, of course. And something like this. So this could become my signature. In order to make it into a tube, you have to export it, but you can only export it as a single layer. So if I try to export it at this point, I'll go to File, Export, Picture Tube, and it will tell me that it has to be 24-bit and only one raster image with a transparency. So what I'll do, I'll just right-click, Merge, Visible, so I have only one. I don't want to have too much empty space, so I'm just going to make a selection around here and crop this to become my signature. So now I will go again, Export, Picture Tube, and you can see I have the number of cells across is 1 in 1 because I have only one image. Placement mode and selection mode, really, they don't matter because I have only one. It's not like I'm going to place my signature all around a frame. And the scale, I can keep it at 100. I can always adjust it later. So I'll put it with a ZZ, so it's going to just AA. So it's going to be easier to find. And I can call it Signature Carole. You can see at the bottom here, it's PSP tube. I think there's one letter missing, but it's okay. So it's going to save it as a tube. So now if I open a photo, just any photo of mine, I can go down to my picture tubes and I'll select all just so I don't have to go in any folder. And where do I have my AAA? here, my signature is here. So I can simply add a new layer because I don't want to have it directly on my photo, since I might want to change the placement or I might want to change the color. So I'll just add a new raster layer. Or in this case, I could have it created as a new raster layer. And I just click and I have my signature. If I'm not happy because it's too dark, now it's a raster layer, so I can really do whatever I want. I can adjust the brightness and change it to white. I can use my pick tool and I can size it down if I find it too big. I can move it to the left or the right. It's really easy. So now I have it as a tube, so any image I can just click and that's it. My image has become a tube, and it's going to be able make it easy to use at any point. Okay, now if you want to create a picture tube that has more than one image, I'll just create one here quickly because the process can be long. It depends on how many images you want. So I'll just place guides at every 200 just so I have an idea of the cells. And I'm going to use a preset shape. Let's say I'm going to be using those stars, that star shape, and I would like to have it maybe like a nice orangey. So I can create one star here, one star here, and I can rotate them a bit so it's not going to be always the same. Why am I placing them in different places? It's because I would like to have them slightly off the line, my cursor movement. So that way they won't be all exactly in one straight line. So let's make one here. Okay. Of course they are vector. So in this case it won't let me. I have to convert that to a raster, and also it has to be only one. So I'll just merge visible. Okay, I have my images. If I want to add a drop shadow, I could do it now. So that way, if they overlap, it might look good, because once they overlap in a single layer, you can't add those shadows. So now let's go and export them as picture tubes. So in this case, I have 3 cells across, so I change it to 3. I have 2 cells down. The placement mode, I don't want them to be even, so I keep it random. The step size is just, it always says 200 by default. So it's up to you if you want them closer together or more spread apart. In the case of random placement, it will just make them denser if the step size is smaller, or more spread apart. And the selection mode is random. You don't want necessarily the image 1 and then 2 and 3 and 4. In this case, it's random, so that's fine. The scale is okay. So again, I'll put them and I'll put golden stars. So you see here the extension, PSP tube. And let's just delete this. And I'll just remove my guides so nothing snaps or anything. And let's go into my picture tubes. And I should have my golden star here. And you can see now what happens. They are all over the place. I can change the scale. Might want them smaller. And I can want them spread apart, not too dense. And that's how I created a multiple image with random placement of the tubes. Of course, there's more to this, because you can also have some images or in picture tubes that are going to be incremental, and some that are going to be angular, like those chains and tire tracks and ropes and so on. But that takes much longer to execute. But I think it will give you a good idea of what you can do with picture tubes. So if you want to use a rope, you can use the rope tube to maybe make a knot, make a frame, attach a tag. You can even write also, because if you have a rope, let's go with that rope here. Well, you can write with your cursor. Why not? It's really kind of fun thing to do. And if you have flowers, well, you can write also with flowers. Of course, not all the tubes can be used for all the same purpose. They have different purpose, but they, as you can see, they are very powerful, and it is more than most people know how to use picture tubes. So I think that kind of covers a good base about the picture tubes. Maybe we can look at if we have any particular question.
Yes, we've got a few questions and we've got a little bit of time to answer them. So the first question, give me a second here. When you were showing the leaves on the tree, can you
Right.
erase specific leaves that you don't want?
No, that's the problem. Well, not problem, but that's the feature of creating on a new raster layer. This has been added fairly recently, and it gives you that option. So, but in that case, you have to go click, 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 click all the time, and you cannot drag, because every cursor click, if you can call it like that, will become a new layer. So if you click and drag, it's going to be one layer. So what I was doing, I was not just doing click, click, I was just dragging like in a spiral all over. So in that case, you cannot remove individual leaves. But if I had done it with the click, click, click all the time, then yes, I could have gone down and checked which layer I don't want to have, and I can remove them.
Okay, I have another question. It's referencing when you were using the flowers tubes. Somebody was asking, can they be deformed or manipulated so they don't all look like they're facing the person? Like if they were on different layers, can you manipulate them?
Yes, because since if they are on different layers, they will behave like just any layer. So you can use your pick tool, you can rotate them, you can change color if you want. You can don't do anything that you really want. As long as they are on their own layers, they will behave like any layer, any raster layer. So you can manipulate them as you wish.
Okay, and that means that you can change the size of a picture
Yes,
tube after you've
yes,
placed it. Okay,
yes. Because
great.
once you placed it on your project as a layer, they're not tubes per se anymore. They're just a layer. So you
Got
can do
it.
what you want.
Okay. What else here? Somebody's asked, can tubes be used to create a shaft of light across a person in a picture? So that makes me think that they'd need to have some transparency to them. You can
Well,
use.
yes, yes. Some tubes can be transparent. Most of them here are opaque. But let's just make a demonstration, and I'm just going to use this. There are some. Let's see here. This is a flare, and if I click, it's fairly transparent. Um, let's see. I think. Whoops. Yeah. Let's go back to. Ah, I had one there. There might be some neon here. I think that comes. I'll just make it on its own layer just to make sure. And you can see how it's somewhat transparent. So if I was, let's just make something underneath that is small. This we can see. I guess it's somewhat a little not very transparent. So you see on the sides it's transparent. So the tube can be made translucent if you want. It just depends on many things. There's one, let's see, no, not a brush, it's the tube. There is one that will be included. It's the red one. Red here. And I'll just make new layer. And this is a pipe cleaner. And you can see kind of through. You see? So it just depends on the opacity of your actual tube and the step. So it could be, you could have probably a streak of light that will be maybe, I don't know, when you create it, something like 1 or 2 or 3% opacity. So you basically don't see it, but by adding it in a continuous manner, then it would kind of give the transparency that you might want. So it is possible. It's kind of a matter of tweaking with the opacity of the original tube file.
Can you also use the opacity slider in your layers panel if they're on separate layers?
Yeah. Of course. Just like this, I can just change that. You can
Perfect.
see how it goes. It shows. So as a layer, once you apply them, the feature of the picture tube is the ability to place those images or those elements onto a layer. Once they are on the layer, you do whatever you want. You change the opacity, you change the blend mode, you change the size, the color, whatever.
Right. Okay. What is the purpose of the smart edge on the toolbar?
Okay, so this will, okay, let's just remove this. This is kind of a good question, and I forgot to mention it. The smart edge will look at the edges and place the tubes based on the edge. So it's going to be more obvious when you are using elements like this flower, for example. Let's just say that's pretty big, and too low. I'll just remove the size. So if I was to have it like this, okay, the smart edge is not selected, and I'll place it on the edge, it doesn't do much, or at least it does what I want. But if I want to be placing it based on the edge, I could have the smart edge, and if you can see, it will place it until it finds an edge. So sometimes it could be interesting if you want to have butterflies and you want to have the butterflies that look like they're behind. That's kind of one trick. This smart edge is also used for the brush tool, but for the picture tube, it's kind of neat. If I want to have it on top, then see, I can go inside. Kind of looks funny, but you can see the actual purpose or how it works.
Thank you. All right, we just have 2 more minutes, and there's a lot of questions still. So we'll do what we've been doing in the past webinars, where we get an influx of questions, and the ones that weren't answered, we'll prepare some answers after the webinar and send a link to those questions and answers out with the follow-up email tomorrow. Before we wrap it up, Carole, I have a few people asking what is your website URL? So I'm going to give a direct link that Carole's created to where you can get the 12 different picture tubes that she's offering. However, Carole, if you want to tell your websites or website now to the audience, just for future reference.
Yes, my site is creationcassell.com/store.